What would you do if one quiet morning you woke up to find that an entire village had vanished? No warnings, no signs, nothing but an eerie silence where laughter and voices once filled the air. The homes, once alive with activity, now empty, furniture undisturbed, meals half-eaten and every path deserted. Not a single soul left behind. Imagine walking into a village that had just hours before been brimming with life, only to find the streets abandoned. No sounds, no movement, not even the familiar hum of life. A place that was once a haven of joy, now swallowed by an unnatural stillness. A place where secrets hid in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The village hadn't been affected by any storm, any earthquake or disaster. No, this was something else, something far more mysterious. Some would call it a curse, others a lesson. But no one could have predicted the chain of events that would lead to this empty village. And what's more chilling is the fact that, despite the village's sudden disappearance, the world outside remained unaware. The earth continued to turn. The sun rose. But there was one thing that couldn't be ignored: the quiet. That strange, heavy silence that spoke volumes. Who was responsible for this? What force could possibly erase an entire village in one night, leaving nothing but a cold, empty landscape in its wake? And what terrible price had been paid by those who once lived there? This is the chilling tale of a village that vanished overnight, and as we uncover the truth, you might find yourself questioning the delicate balance between life and death, between promise and betrayal.
Welcome to Rare Tales Unfold. If you love spine-chilling mysteries like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share it with your loved ones.
Nestled deep within the embrace of towering mountains, the village had once been a beacon of beauty and harmony. It sat in a valley, surrounded by lush greenery, where the sun bathed the earth in a golden glow. Here the rivers sang as they meandered through the land, their waters so pure, they shimmered like liquid crystal. Cattle grazed peacefully in the wide open fields, while children laughed and ran freely through the streets, their voices mingling with the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. The village was a sanctuary of life, where nature and mankind coexisted in perfect balance. From above, the village looked like a carefully painted masterpiece. The vibrant greens of the fields, the neat rows of crops stretching toward the horizon, and the warmth of the homes tucked within the valley's embrace. It all seemed too perfect, almost untouched by time. This was a place where every season brought bounty, and every day was filled with laughter and work. The villagers were known far and wide for their unity, their sense of community, and the prosperity that flowed from their connection to the land. But beneath the surface of this paradise, beneath the smiles and the stories shared by the fireside, lay an unspoken truth, a secret that not even the most watchful eyes could see. It was a pact forged long ago under the cover of darkness, when the village was young and the land still untamed. The people had made promises, sacrifices, and agreements with something far older than any of them could imagine. No one spoke of it openly, but the elders knew. They carried the weight of the village's history, the history that was etched in whispers passed down through generations. It was a pact with a force that lived in the earth itself, a force that could not be ignored. And though it had been dormant for years, its slumber was fragile. A crack had formed, unnoticed at first. Greed, the most dangerous of all human flaws, had begun to take root among the villagers. As the years passed, their desires grew. What had once been enough was no longer satisfying. The land that had given so much began to be taken for granted, its gifts expected, no longer cherished. And as the village flourished, so too did the temptation to push beyond the boundaries set by the ancient pact. The promises made long ago were forgotten, the warnings ignored, and the greed that festered in the hearts of a few slowly began to chip away at the very foundation of the village's harmony. Unseen, in the shadowed corners of the village, a dark figure watched over them. Its presence was felt, though never seen, lurking just beyond the edge of their awareness. For now, it bided its time, waiting for the moment when the weight of their actions would demand a price. The land had been patient, but patience is not infinite. The pact was about to break, and when it did, nothing would remain the same. A figure, weary and weathered from days of travel, stepped into the village just as the first light of dawn stretched across the land. The soft glow of the rising sun painted the abandoned streets with an eerie, unnatural calm. The traveller had expected the familiar sights of a thriving community, a village where the sounds of daily life filled the air, where voices called from the market, where children's laughter echoed down the paths. But as he walked deeper into the village, his steps grew heavier, his heart thudding against his chest. The streets were eerily still. There was no movement, no voices. The houses stood silent, their windows empty, their doors ajar as though someone had simply forgotten to shut them. The wind howled through the empty lanes, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. The traveller's eyes scanned the quiet scene, confusion quickly giving way to a sense of unease. He passed the first house, noticing a half-eaten meal still sitting on a table inside, untouched and cold, as if the owner had simply walked away mid-bite. A few steps more, and he came upon a child's doll, abandoned in the middle of the street. Its face, once bright and full of life, now stared up at the sky, eyes vacant, as if asking the same question the traveller was wondering. Where had everyone gone? He stopped in his tracks, as the sound of a door creaking on its hinges broke the silence, the low groan of wood against metal echoing in the quiet air. He approached cautiously, eyes narrowing. Every house was the same, empty, abandoned. Yet there were signs that people had once lived here, had just vanished. The stillness was unnerving, unnatural. It was as though time had simply stopped. As the traveller made his way deeper into the village, his thoughts began to drift back to the stories he had heard along his journey. Stories of this village, stories that had always seemed too fantastical to be true. But now, as he stood in the midst of the silence, the weight of those tales pressed on him. His eyes narrowed, and the sounds of the village faded, replaced by the murmur of voices from the past. He could hear the elder's voice echoing through his mind, warning of a time when greed would destroy them all. The traveller's steps faltered as memories of the villagers' actions came flooding back. He saw them, the villagers in their prime, working together, sharing in the bounty of the land, laughing around fires, celebrating the fruits of their labour. But as the years passed, something had changed. The greed that had always lingered just beneath the surface began to grow. The land, once a source of life and sustenance, was no longer enough. One by one, the villagers had ignored the warnings, the tales passed down by the elders, the ancient whispers of the land's protector, the spirit that had watched over them all. And so, they began to plunder. They ventured into the sacred grove, a place untouched by time, a place the elders had warned was forbidden. As the villagers cut down trees, cracked open the earth, and disturbed the spirits that lived within, the land itself seemed to tremble. They had taken more than they were meant to. They had broken the pact that had kept them safe, and now they would pay the price. The traveller could hear the faint rustling of leaves, the cracking of branches underfoot, as if the land itself had begun to rebel against its trespassers. He saw the flash of figures, villagers, wide-eyed, realizing too late the gravity of their actions. The land had awakened, and with it, the spirit they had angered. But it was too late for regret. The consequences of their greed had already set the wheels of fate in motion. The land had risen up, and now there was no going back. The traveller's heart raced as the images of the past grew clearer, more vivid. He could hear the whisper of the wind, carrying the voice of the elder now long gone, warning them.
The balance must be respected. Take too much and you will lose it all.
But the villagers had failed to listen, and in their greed, they had sealed their own fate. The village, once full of life, now lay abandoned, a testament to their choices. The traveller knew, as he stood in the empty streets, that whatever had happened here, whatever force had taken the village, was not yet finished. It was still out there, watching, waiting. The traveller had wandered deeper into the village, each step more uncertain than the last, as if the very air around him was thickening. His eyes scanned the remnants of a once vibrant place, now left in a disturbing silence. But something, an undeniable pull, guided him to an area he hadn't noticed before. Hidden between two overgrown trees, shrouded in shadows, was an old shrine, its stones worn with age, its markings faded by time. It stood there, as though forgotten by everyone, yet somehow it had been waiting for him. He approached, curiosity gnawing at him. The ground beneath him seemed colder here, the wind sharper, and the stillness heavier. He knelt before the shrine, his fingers tracing the moss-covered carvings, feeling a strange chill run through him as if the stones themselves were alive. He paused, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end, his breath shallow. Then, without warning, a voice cut through the silence so cold it seemed to freeze the very air. It was a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing in the depths of his mind.
Their greed consumed the land. The land has consumed them.
The words lingered in the air, like an ancient curse being whispered from the depths of time. The traveller's heart pounded in his chest, his eyes darting around, searching for the source. The voice was not human. It was something far older, something bound to this place, to this land. And before he could fully comprehend what had just happened, the ground beneath him trembled. Suddenly, a gust of wind howled through the village, strong enough to knock his torch from his hand. It flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. But it wasn't just the torch that extinguished. The air itself seemed to change, thickening, charging with an energy he couldn't explain. He could feel it, like the land itself was shifting, reacting to something. And that's when he saw it. A figure, towering and shapeless, began to emerge from the shadows. It was a mass of swirling winds and shadows, its form constantly changing, as though it was not bound by any laws of nature. And in the center of the storm of air and dark shapes, two glowing eyes fixed on him. The figure's presence seemed to freeze time itself. The traveller's breath caught in his throat as he stood frozen, unable to look away. The air crackled with energy. The very earth beneath his feet seemed to pulse with a rhythm, a heartbeat. The figure spoke again, its voice echoing, not in words, but in a deep resonating force that seemed to shake the very foundation of the land.
Their greed consumed the land. The land has consumed them.
The traveller's mind raced, trying to understand. The words were clear, but the meaning, its true weight, began to sink in. The villagers had taken too much. They had ignored the warnings, disturbed the very balance that had kept them safe. And now, the land had risen to take its vengeance. With a single sweeping motion, the figure raised its arms. The earth rumbled, a deep guttural sound that seemed to come from the depths of the world itself. The traveller's knees buckled, his entire body shaking, as the wind intensified, the storm swirling around him, pushing him back. He barely had time to brace himself as the earth cracked open, swallowing the village whole. In an instant, the entire village seemed to vanish. Buildings, trees, homes, and fields, all consumed by the earth as if they had never existed. a great chasm opened up, wide and deep, and in one swift motion, the village was gone, swallowed by the land, leaving behind nothing but remnants of its former self. The traveller stood there, speechless, as dust settled where once there had been life. How could it be? How could such a place, a community so vibrant, vanish overnight without a trace? The wind howled again, and the traveller could feel the land's gaze upon him, its judgment lingering in the air. It wasn't done. Number. The land was not done yet. The traveller stumbled away from the wreckage, each step heavier than the last. His mind struggled to process the enormity of what he had just witnessed. The village, once teeming with life, now reduced to nothing more than a void, an echo of what had been. He had searched the ruins, but there was no sign of the people who once called this place home. No trace of their laughter, their struggles, their hopes. It was as though the very essence of the village had been erased from existence. The world, for all its mystery, had given no answers, only this chilling truth. He walked through the deserted streets, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land, and yet there was no warmth in its light. The silence followed him, pressing in on him like a weight he could not shake, the weight of what he had learned, of what had happened. It was a burden he did not know how to carry, yet it was his alone to bear. As he moved further from the village, he could still feel the eyes of the spirit upon him. They were there, in the back of his mind, glowing like embers in the dark. The village had paid the price for its greed, for its defiance of the natural order. And now, that same force lingered in the air, a reminder of the land's power, its authority over those who dared to disrupt its balance. The traveller could not forget the spirit's words, ringing in his ears with every step he took. Their greed consumed the land, now the land has consumed them. It was a warning, one that would echo through time, a lesson for anyone willing to listen. The villagers had made their choices, had let their desires cloud their judgment, and in the end, the land had taken everything from them. There was no escaping that truth. He didn't know how long he walked, only that he couldn't stop. Each step felt like it brought him farther from the village, yet closer to something he couldn't name. The world around him seemed to shift with each passing moment, the trees bending in the wind, the ground beneath his feet shifting with a quiet, knowing hum. The spirit, he realized, was not gone. It was still there, watching, waiting. As the traveller reached the edge of the valley, he turned one last time to look at the village, now a distant memory fading into the twilight. And there, for just a moment, he saw it. The eyes. They glowed faintly in the distance, a final, silent message. And then, as quickly as they had appeared, they were gone, swallowed by the night. The lesson was clear. The land had no mercy, no tolerance for those who forgot the balance it required. The villagers had broken their pact, and in doing so, had sealed their own fate. In the end, it was a reminder to all: respect the balance of life, or risk losing everything. The traveller continued his journey, carrying the story with him, the story of the village that vanished overnight, a story that would live on, not just in his mind, but in the hearts of those who would listen. The tale would be passed down, a warning whispered from one generation to the next, a reminder of the price of greed and the fragile line between prosperity and destruction. As he walked, the wind began to stir once more, soft and gentle, as if the land itself was bidding him farewell. But in that wind there was something else, something he could not quite grasp. Perhaps it was the spirit's voice, still lingering in the air, or perhaps it was the land, reminding him that its watchful eyes would always be there, waiting. And the traveller, though far from the village, knew that the story of the vanished village would never truly leave him. He had learned its lesson, and now it was his to share. As the traveller finally reached the outskirts of the village, the weight of the truth pressed down on him with an unbearable heaviness. The land that had once been vibrant, full of life, was now a hollow, lifeless shell, and he could not escape the realization that it was all because of greed, the same greed that had driven the villagers to destroy the balance they had relied on for generations. He thought of the faces he had seen in the past, the families, the laughter, the hopes they had shared, now nothing but distant memories swallowed by the earth. How had they not known? How had they allowed their desires to cloud their judgment, to push them beyond the boundaries of what was sacred? They had known the stories, heard the warnings, but still they had ignored the ancient pact. And now, it was too late. The land had reclaimed them, and with it, their village, its name now a ghost, its history reduced to whispers in the wind. The traveller felt the cold grip of uncertainty gnawing at his mind. What would he have done if he had been one of them? Would he have ignored the warnings? Would he have let his own desires lead him astray? The questions echoed within him unanswered. He had been a witness to their downfall, but he had not been part of their world. He had only arrived after it was too late. The journey back was just as silent, just as heavy. The earth seemed to close in around him, the shadows stretching longer with every step, as though the land itself was trying to swallow him whole. What had he learned? Was it simply a tale of caution? Or was there something deeper, something more universal about the greed that had consumed this village? As the traveller continued to move away from the ruins, he could not shake the thought of what might have been, of the choices the villagers had made. And he couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if they had chosen differently.
What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have made the same decisions? Would you have honored the pact? Or would you have succumbed to the temptation of power? And if you enjoyed this story, if the tale of the village that vanished overnight resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to Rare Tales Unfold. Hit the like button and share this video with your loved ones, because the lessons we learn here about greed, balance, and respect for the world around us are ones that should be shared. Until next time, stay curious, stay respectful, and always remember the fragile balance of life.